Focus on Headline. And we're going to take a look at what major issues are making the headlines today on Focus on Headline. For this, joining us in the studio, we have our reporters, Han-dan and Kwon-soa. Guys, welcome back.
Good evening.
We're going to start things off with some latest developments on the latest provocations from North Korea. We talked about the launch of the ICBM last Friday. Over the weekend, the North State media reporting of its Hwasong-17 intercontinental ballistic missile test that it conducted once again last Friday, even warning of further military actions and even nuclear development as well. So you're going to start us off. Give us the latest here.
Sure. So following its firing of an ICBM on Friday, the North Korean Central News Agency said on Saturday a new kind of missile has been test-fired the day before under the supervision of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. The KCNA said it was a Hwasong-17 that was launched from Pyongyang International Airfield and flew a distance of 999.2 kilometers at a maximum altitude of 6,049 kilometers for 4,145 seconds. So that's almost the same as the South Korean military's analysis said on Friday, which said the missile flew 1,000 kilometers at an altitude of 6,100 kilometers and speeds of Mach 22. The range of the missile is assessed to be sufficient to reach the entire U.S. mainland. The KCNA quoted Kim Jong-un as saying that North Korea should clearly demonstrate its strongest will to, quote, retaliate the hysteric aggression war drills by the enemies seeking to destroy peace and stability in the Korean Peninsula in the region, obviously pointing to the U.S. and South Korea and their joint military exercises. Kim also reportedly declared that if these enemies continue to pose threats, the North will react with nuclear weapons and all-out confrontation. What was noticeable in the KCNA's report is that it mentioned the units in charge of operating intercontinental ballistic missiles, as it cited the regime leader as urging ICBM units and all the units operating tactical nukes to intensify their training in order to, quote, perfectly discharge their important strategic duty in any situation and any moment.
All right, so it is not the first time that the North has conducted ICBM test, but apparently this is the first time the North even mentioned what's being dubbed as the ICBM units then.
Right. It was the first time North Korean media publicly referred to such units, even though the existence of them was widely known. What was previously known is there were a number of such units under the North's strategic forces, with experts believing there are 4 ICBM units, 3 near North Korea's border with China and 1 in the central part of the country. South Korea's military so far has not confirmed any of the units' official names or where they belonged to. According to Shin Jong-woo, a senior researcher at the Korea Defense Security Forum in Seoul, it seems like the North's latest report was a show-off to the U.S. to demonstrate its advanced ICBM capabilities with a successful firing of the Hwasong-17 at a high angle. So maybe also the revealing of their unit has got to do with that. In fact, Kim Jong-un was also quoted as saying the test fire clearly proved the reliability of the new major strategic weapon system to be representative of the DPRK's strategic forces. So with these forces seemingly referring to those ICBM units as well. Meanwhile, South Korea's military this Monday reassessed the ICBM fired on Friday was a Hwasong-17, but there is no information that indicates Pyongyang is actually deploying the ICBM for operation. U.S. and South Korea intelligence authorities are conducting additional analyses on that matter.
Moving on here, Dan, you are a mother of a very beautiful young
Thank you.
child, daughter that you have. What do you normally like to do on weekends with her?
Well, certainly I don't oversee an ICBM launch with my daughter like
Exactly.
Kim Jong-un did.
Yeah, that is exactly why I asked, because this is so unusual. It's been garnering a lot of media attention right now. Number one, it's major news in that Kim Jong-un kind of revealed his daughter for the very first time. I believe it's known that he has 3 children, I believe, and the identity and the how they look. I think we only know the names of his children, but one of his daughters oversaw the ICBM launch hand in hand with her father, making her first public appearance covered by the state media here. I mean, this is quite unusual. Dan, what's behind this?
Well, there are several assumptions being made by experts on Kim's calculations behind the move, but most experts agree that it was to put North Korea and the world on notice that North Korea's Hwasong-17 is now a credible strategic weapon that can contain U.S. military threats. They say that inviting his family to the ICBM test site is a way of showing self-confidence in the state's nuclear and missile capabilities. The move is also expected to effectively quell questions that were raised after its previous ICBM launch attempt on November 3rd, which failed after second stage separation. Experts also say that it's part of North Korea's propaganda to justify continual development of its missile and nuclear program by showing its people that it's crucial for the security of the state's future generations. Some experts also raised the possibility of Kim sending a message about the succession of his throne. But experts are sharply divided on this. Some say that just like Kim's father, late leader Kim Jong-il, who chose Kim over his 2 older brothers, Kim may be considering his second daughter as the next leader of the dynastic totalitarian dictatorship. According to South Korea's intelligence, Kim's wife Lee Sol-ju gave birth to 3 children in 2010, 2013, and in 2017. And this girl, who grabbed global headlines, is presumed to be the second daughter, whose name, according to NBA star Dennis Rodman, is Kim Ju-ae. They say that if this girl shows up more frequently with Kim in public events, it may signal that Kim has pinpointed her as his successor. But others argue that the succession theory is going a bit too far, a bit too early, as Kim, born in 1984, is only in his 30s. And they add that a female leader will be hard for the North Korean people to accept as the successor of Kim Jong-un and their future supreme leader. Other possible reasons being cited by pundits include that Kim may be trying to emphasize his friendly image as an attentive and kind family man to his people and the world.
Amongst the many very unusual things that Kim Jong-un has done in the past, this has to be one of those. Over in the U.S., I don't know if you guys know, but there's Take Your Daughter to Work Day. And stuff like that. This is a very unusual example of this. But you have to take into consideration, like you said, I mean, he's only in his 30s, right? Let's say he's born in 1984. He's in his late 30s. He is very young, which means that potentially he has many, many years to come. But the thing that always pops up is his health conditions, right? He's very much obese. He's known to have had a number of health issues as well. And so there's always been kind of talks that who is going to succeed Kim Jong-un. There was even talks about his sister, Kim Yo-jong, as a successor, which is why they're saying that she's kind of playing, when they play the good cop, bad cop role, right? They want to make sure she's kind of the mean one out of everyone, out of the two, and so that she can show everyone that she has what it takes to lead a country. But at the same time, I mean, even if it's like the first child of Kim Jong-un, I mean, they're just way too young at this time. Do they go through training this early? Probably. I think Kim Jong-un, when he was a child, he went through a number of his, go to your daddy's workplace kind of a thing with Kim Jong-il. But it is very unusual and an interesting news as well.
It's also very interesting that we get to hear of the name by Dennis Rodman.
yeah, because like Dennis Rodman is like one of the very few people that's actually like really
Close
friends.
to Kim Jong-un,
yeah,
right?
Kim Jong-un, right? I wouldn't be surprised if they're like, talking over the phone every other week or something, maybe months and stuff like that. He was able to meet his family and, they got really personal. And so, of all people, Dennis Rodman's the one with the source of all this. In the meantime, the G7 calling on the UN Security Council to take on measures against North Korea's string of provocations that we've been seeing here on the Korean Peninsula. So what did the group say this time?
The foreign ministers of the G7, which are the US, Japan, Germany, the UK, France, Canada, and Italy, released a statement on Sunday, so just 2 days after the latest launch of an ICBM by North Korea, in which they denounced North Korea's missile launches and urged for the UN Security Council to respond with additional significant measures. The G7 condemned the unprecedented series of unlawful ballistic missile launches the North conducted in 2022, saying they pose a serious threat to regional and international peace and security, adding that Pyongyang will never be acknowledged as a nuclear weapon state. The ministers of the 7 states stressed that North Korea's actions demand a, quote, united and robust response by the international community. And with the UNSC set to hold a meeting on Monday local time on the North's continuous threats, it looks like the G7's statement may have been a push towards China and Russia, which are permanent members of the UN Security Council. So a push to them to side with the other members in punishing the North for its actions. Because back in May, following the North's other ICBM back then, a U.S. drafted resolution that included new sanctions against Pyongyang had been vetoed by China and Russia.
Yeah, and that was just the thing. I mean, what's the point of, trying to push for these resolutions if China and Russia are going to continue to kind of veto this? But China's kind of reason for vetoing is kind of interesting because they go, well, I mean, these sanctions don't even work in the first place, and it doesn't really help. It's just going to upset North Korea even more. You're going to provoke them to fire away missiles even more. So that's their reason for this. But if North Korea does end up testing their 7th nuclear test, the consensus is that maybe China and Russia might not veto that. In the meantime, North Korea's foreign minister has called UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres a, quote, puppet of the United States. This is for joining the U.S.-led condemnation of the North's recent intercontinental ballistic missile test. Tan, you have more on this.
Right. North Korea's Foreign Minister Choi Sun-hee lashed out at UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, calling him a puppet of the United States. The remarks came after the UN chief issued a statement strongly condemning North Korea's ICBM launch on Friday and reiterating his call on the North to immediately desist from taking any further provocative actions. Guterres' statement came after the U.S. and other countries issued similar criticism of the North's ICBM test that showed a potential to strike anywhere in the continental U.S. In a statement carried by state media, Choi said, I, quote unquote, I often take the UN Secretary General for a member of the U.S. White House or its State Department. And also, quote unquote, I express my strong regret over the fact that the UN chief has taken a very deplorable attitude, oblivious of the purpose and principles of the UN Charter and its proper mission, which is to maintain impartiality, objectivity, and equity in all matters. She noted that Guterres called Pyongyang's legitimate and just right to exercise self-defense against the U.S. a provocation, claiming that a series of provocative nuclear war rehearsals staged by the U.S.-led allies forces involving nuclear strategic assets in and around the Korean Peninsula all year round is what ratcheted up tensions in the region. Choi accused Guterres of overlooking the U.S. and its allies taking the North's ICBM test to the UN Security Council, saying that this clearly proves that he is a puppet of the U.S. The UN Security Council scheduled an emergency meeting for Monday, but as Hoa mentioned, it's unclear if it can impose new economic sanctions on North Korea, as China and Russia, the two veto-wielding members, have opposed previous moves to toughen sanctions on the North over its banned tests of ballistic missiles earlier this year.
You know, what's interesting is North Korea's foreign minister, Choi Sun-hee, she's been relatively quiet over the past year or so, and now it's just been recent that she's been coming out with a lot of these rhetorics. And what does this signal? Is North Korea really serious at this time Does this also signal more provocations, or maybe bigger provocations to come from North Korea, is what a lot of experts are saying as well. Just very quickly, because we're talking about Kim Jong-un's daughter, going on this, hand in hand with her daddy, watching the ICBM launch. Looking at the wiki page for Kim Joo-hye, it says that I didn't know, because there was so much mystery surrounding the family of, the kids of Kim Jong-un. She apparently has the first child is a son. I don't know if you guys knew this. It says that she has an oppa, which means an older brother, which means that the first child is a son. She is the second child, and the gender and name of, I believe, the third child is still shrouded in mystery right now. So that's the other question is, if you go into traditionally, right, the way that it's run traditionally, you would assume that Kim Jong-un would probably take not only their oldest child, but it's a son as well, to potentially be the leading front runner for taking over the helm after Kim Jong-un passes away.
But maybe that's exactly why he tries to not reveal him yet.
Even more.
Right. I've read some articles on that too, because I don't know if that's it's a fact that his first child is a son or not. But I think many reports are, and many North Korea pundits are presuming his first child to be a son. And for the very reason that Soa just mentioned, he's not, that he's still wrapped up in mystery. And Kim Jong-un, for that very reason, he's not unveiling his son, because he will be the next leader, and it's quite, it poses quite a lot of risks to expose his face and other personal information about him at such an early age.
Yeah, and that's the incredible thing about how North Korea kind of keeps all this secret, because even with the daughter that we talked about, the assumption was that when they found that she was pregnant and she had a child, that everyone said, it's highly likely that it's a daughter. They also thought that Kim Joo-hye, who is the name of the second child, the daughter that we were talking about in the recent report, was the first child, but that's not true. And that you're absolutely right. And there's probably a big reason as to why his first child, who is apparently a son, is kept under shroud here. And very little information is known about the family there for obvious reasons. Guys, let's move on to some domestic news this time.
I'd be not surprised if his son is not even in North Korea. Maybe he's also somewhere in Switzerland or in another country. Or Russia. That's also an assumption.
Russia would not be a pleasant place to be at right now.
But usually the elite course for a North Korean elite would be studying abroad, which includes Switzerland and Russia.
Yeah, because if he was born in 2010 is what they're saying, and it's 2020, 12 years old. 12 years old is what we're assuming here. Almost a teenager. You're about to head over to, I think, high school. So, wow, goodness, he's almost of age then. But yeah, always, we have very little information. It's all speculation, but you're absolutely right. Kim Jong-un also studying abroad. We know that he studied in Switzerland and so forth, and that's definitely something that his son might be going towards as well. Let's talk about President Yoon Suk-yeol. And one of the things that we saw when he became president was these doorstepping sessions where he steps out of his residence, has a chance to speak to the press pool there, but he's actually stopped this. And this is following an incident between a broadcaster and the presidential office last week. So let's get the details of this.
Right. The presidential office has decided to suspend doorstepping as of November 21st. That's the notice the presidential office released to the press on Monday. The doorstepping, which is a regular Q&A session that President Yoon Suk-yeol held every morning on his way to his office, was a trademark of the Yoon administration that vowed to communicate as much as possible with the public. However, the presidential office decided the doorstepping sessions cannot continue, quote, without fundamental measures to prevent a recurrence of the recent unsavory incident. And that incident being one where an NBC reporter and a presidential aide got into to a loud argument last week. It was related to the exclusion of NBC reporters from the presidential jet on President Yoon's trip to Southeast Asia that ended up with the Secretary for Public Relations Planning and the NBC reporter intensifying their quarrel. So this was during the stepping recently. So for now, the doorstepping has been suspended indefinitely. The presidential office said it was conceived for open communication with the nation's people, and the office will consider a resumption if, quote, measures are drawn up to fulfill that purpose. So far, there were just some short suspensions, once due to a spread of COVID-19 among the press, actually the presidential reporters, and during the week-long national mourning period over the Itaewon crowd crush accident. So in total, there were 61 rounds of this what's also dubbed in-office interviews. They lasted for an average of 3 minutes and 20 seconds a day. So the last one was on Friday. And so far, a total of 3 hours and 23 minutes is how much these door sessions took up. Sometimes they were just 10 seconds long. Right. Probably President Yoon was busy or did not really have much to say. The longest was 10 minutes and 20 seconds. And that was actually after President Yoon's Southeast Asia trip, mainly on the achievements there. Yoon supporters who scold the NBC reporters' attitude see the decision of suspending the doorstepping as inevitable. The opposition assesses the move as selective suppression of media that's critical of the president. And in the meantime, the Presidential Secretary for External Cooperation, Kim Yong-tae, this Monday announced to resign as he feels moral responsibility for the accident. But he's not the one who was involved in the quarrel last week with the NBC reporter.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of talks about this. Even the foreign media outlets are kind of covering this and the way that they're comparing it. And I made this comparison as well. If you guys remember during the Trump administration with the CNN reporters, right? The CNN reporters for the White House press pool was basically banned from taking part in any of former President Trump's presser. And so they're kind of saying, well, you know, President Yoon Suk-yeol is sort of doing this as well. And they're making that comparison. But it is getting interesting with this. A number of media outlets have also kind of shown support for NBC. But we'll see what happens moving forward and whether or not these doorstepping sessions will continue later down in the road. Also, moving on, following that KF-16 fighter crash this past Sunday, the Air Force has set Monday as what's been dubbed as either Pinset Day or Tweezers Day. It's actually used both ways here. This is a day for overall safety inspections on all aircrafts. Tan, let's get more on this.
Right. An official from the Air Force said at a regular briefing today that the military will designate today, Monday, November 21st, as Pinset Day or Tweezers Day to thoroughly conduct overall safety checks on all aircraft, their operations, and related procedures. Operations of all aircraft have come to a halt, except for surveillance and emergency assets. A Pinset Day or Tweezers Day refers to a day in which the Air Force examines various safety-related procedures. The officials said flights will resume after step-by-step safety verifications. The inspection will focus on the engine systems of the aircraft as the KF-16 has crashed due to an engine system malfunction. The Air Force temporarily suspended flights of all types of aircraft except for reconnaissance assets and emergency standby forces, while KF-16 flights will remain banned until the exact cause of the accident is identified. A KF-16C fighter jet crashed due to an unspecified engine abnormality during a flight mission on Sunday, with its pilot having safely escaped. The pilot of the single-seat jet belonging to the 19th Fighter Wing made an emergency ejection in a mountainous area about 20 kilometers west of an airbase in Wonju, some 85 kilometers east of Seoul, at around 8 p.m., according to the armed service. Also today, the Air Force postponed a biannual air exercise dubbed the Soaring Eagle exercise, initially planned for this week due to the grounding of its warplanes. Launched in 2008, It's a biannual aerial combat exercise involving radar evading F-35A fighter jets and dozens of other warplanes. The Air Force previously staged the Soaring Eagle exercise in June, mobilizing some 200 personnel and about 70 warplanes, including F-35As, F-15Ks, and KF-16s.
Again, the good news out of this is the fact that the pilot has safely escaped. I think over the past year or so, there's been a number of accidents with the Air Force where actually the pilot unfortunately passed away. But in this time, the pilot, again, fortunately, safely escaped from that. Guys, let's shift gears here to a topic that's of interest to all. Human beings, no matter where you live, I can't believe still at this time there are actually people out there who don't believe in climate change. I, for one, not one of those people. I believe it's a climate crisis at this time. World leaders wrapping up their discussions in Egypt at the COP27. So brief us on the key takeaways there.
Sure. So it probably was a tough 2 weeks for everyone that participated in the COP27 in Egypt's city of Sharm el-Sheikh. The fact alone that the summit closed on Saturday, 2 days later than the original schedule, showed how difficult it was to come to a conclusion. So let me start with the gist of the outcome that came over after the overnight marathon discussions. You want to hear the good part first or the bad part?
I always like
Always
the
the
bad
good
part.
part.
Oh, really? Oh, my goodness.
Let's go with SJ. He's the host.
Let's go with the good ones then. All right.
Okay, so the good one is an agreement was made on a fund for developing countries that have been affected by climate change.
That was a big one, yeah.
I know. And the bad one is that no agreement was actually made on tangible emissions reduction. So let's get into the details here. The members of the COP27 agreed to set up a fund that's been named Loss and Damage Fund to help poor countries that had to deal with devastating damages due to climate change. So that was really a breakthrough. It's to cover the costs incurred by climate change, and 55 vulnerable countries' combined climate change-linked losses in the past 2 decades totaled an estimated $525 billion US dollars, and that's 20% of their GDP. So you can see how vulnerable these countries are after such incidents. And if nothing's done, the damages will grow further. So that was done. However, there are still many details have to be agreed upon on who's going to fund them when and by how much money. So still many details that have to be set. And then in terms of reduction of emissions, now that's where many people were disappointed, as there were no big details on how much these countries have to do in order to, tackle the issue. I mean, they say that there's not a big change from the 2015 Paris Agreement, and then we had the Glasgow summit that was last year. Yeah. So it looks like there still needs a lot to be discussed. Now, there were 2 temperature goals that were made already back in 2015 to keep the rise well below 2 degrees Celsius. And then in Glasgow last year, nations agreed to focus on a 1.5 degree limit. So it looks like it's not there was no backtrack, but however, there's also nothing that really looked into the near future, how specifically countries are going to fulfill their goals in carbon emissions. So yes, those were the big 2 parts of the COP27 this year.
Yeah, I would say this. I'll be a little bit more optimistic on this front. Number one, when it comes to the Loss and Damage Fund, right? I mean, this is what a lot of the developing countries have been calling for. In fact, a number of our listeners here on Arirang Radio, they're talking about how some of their countries, the sea level rising, it's forced them to kind of relocate to higher grounds, and it costs a lot, right? It's just more than the houses. It's just a number of villages and even cities at certain times having to relocate and move, and that costs a lot of money. A lot of these island countries also impacted by the rising sea levels, right? And so they were saying that even when it comes to the funding, they had like a certain amount that they were going to be pitching out to the developing countries, and over the past 10 years, only 80% has been funded. So they have not been so happy with all this. But you talk about no agreement put in place. I would say this, at least they're not putting in goals that they're probably not going to keep in the first place. I think as optimistic as I want to sound, over the past years now, we've been talking about let's keep it at under a limit of 1.5, under 2 and stuff like that. We are not right now on the pace to do that whatsoever. They were saying that even if we kind of change it up, we're still not going to hit the spot. And the biggest problem, according to some of the climate experts, is that we keep talking about let's go carbon neutral by 2030, 2050. We give these dates that are far in the future. They're saying if they want to start achieving these goals of the 1.5 limit, you have to make the change now. It can't be a gradual change. It has to be a drastic change now. But realistically, it's almost impossible. The sheer financial aspect of things, the amount of money it's going to cost to do all this. So at least they're being more realistic, but it is unfortunate right now. So I don't know. I don't know if they're ever going to be able to, achieve this.
I think, but if countries, especially those who emit the most carbon fuels and everything, if they don't act quickly, then it will actually cost even more in the future to handle all the damages and losses. And Esther, you mentioned rising sea levels. I recently saw a documentary where people in villages, the sea level has gotten up so high that all of their homes, their houses are already like half inside the water, and they just live like that because they have nowhere to go. And this will even get worse. And this is something that it doesn't really hit us. But if we look at those, the reality in some countries, and especially some developing countries who are not even those, the culprits of the global warming, but they have to it's just geographically that their country is being hit by what other countries are doing. So in terms of this fund, I'm really glad that they did have that breakthrough, but we really have to do more in terms of actually tackling the gist of the problem.
And I also want to sound optimistic. I really do. Trust me, I really want to sound as optimistic as I could. But I think it'll be a long, bumpy road ahead until all this very specific details are ironed out on the fund, the landmark fund that was agreed upon at COP27 this year, on who pays how much to actually help these poor countries suffering from the damages and losses induced by natural disasters.
Yeah, I mean, the consensus is if you're one of the major economies that's impacting the climate the most, you should probably share the sheer brunt of the fund, right? But the problem, once again, is it's not about, hey, let's start making changes right now. It's more like, listen, let's just use the money and solve our problem with money by helping developing countries that have been impacted by climate change. Instead of, let's use this money, put a little bit more money now and start making these drastic changes right now. I feel like they're trying to solve everything with money, and that's the other thing. That's the big problem at this time. But even South Korea, there was a report that we covered a couple of months back earlier this year that even South Korea is actually going to be impacted by the rising sea levels, and some of the areas that are going to be impacted.
Will.
Oh, I mean, we're surrounded by water, right? And so they were saying that one of the first places that's going to be hit is like Incheon. Siheung is another area, and there's a number of places that they picked as cities and areas are going to be most impacted by the rising sea level here in South Korea. So we're not exempt from this, which is why, I mean, the government has been pushing for more cleaner energy and things like that. But the change needs to be made right now and not 2030, 2050 and all these dates that we've been getting. All right, let's talk sports this time because this week, starting yesterday, of course, us time, well, actually today, technically, the 2022 FIFA World Cup kicked off. And for all you K-pop fans and ARMYs out there, BTS's Jungkook taking the spotlight during the opening ceremony with his new song Dreamers, and Argentina's Sergio Aguero even going to his SNS saying that, oh boy, this guy could dance. That also took the spotlight as well. Grand ceremony opened the games to be played by 32 qualified teams. This, of course, including South Korea in Group H. They're going to be vying for the world's most coveted football trophy over the next 29 days. Tan, let's get more on the World Cup.
Right. World Cup mascots. BTS's Jungkook, Morgan Freeman and fireworks headlined the big show.
That is so random. That is so random.
Did you guys actually watch it?
No,
The
I
opening
have no
ceremony?
time.
I did.
Okay.
Well,
It was great.
the grand ceremony started with Hollywood big name Morgan Freeman, who said, "From this land we heard a call to the world to connect, to return, if only for a moment, to that which can bring us together," with his distinctive, authoritative voice over a video of desert and ocean scenes kicking off the event. Qatar's Emir Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani arrived at the stadium flanked by FIFA President Gianni Infantino to a roaring crowd. Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, who recently visited Seoul, was also present at the opening ceremony and inaugural match of the tournament that followed. K-pop sensation BTS's Jungkook also headlined the opening ceremony, which also featured a trip down memory lane with vintage mascots and World Cup anthems. He sang a new tournament song called Dreamers, and Qatari singer Fahad Al-Kubaisi also joined him later to sing the song in harmony. Jungkook became the first Korean artist to perform at a World Cup opening ceremony. The event opened a total of 64 games to be played by 32 qualified teams that will vie for the world's most coveted soccer trophy. Unfortunately, Qatar underwhelmed its first ever World Cup match, losing 2-0 to Ecuador, becoming the first host nation to lose an opener in World Cup history. The ceremony wasn't welcomed by everyone, though, with some media writing headlines that there was no beer and plenty of criticisms about the event. This, as there are quite a number of controversies surrounding the first ever World Cup in the Middle Eastern country. Over 6,000 migrant workers are reported to have died in erecting infrastructure for the Games, while Qatari ambassador described homosexuality as damage in the mind, sparking global outrage. There have also been some allegations of corruption and bribery in the process of selecting the host nation, with former president of FIFA, Sepp Blatter, stating that hosting the event in Qatar is a mistake, adding that the choice was bad.
Yeah, that's the thing, and they were saying that basically, if a number of countries were boycotting the recent Beijing Games over human rights issues. Why aren't people boycotting this Qatar World Cup? And yes, Qatar, surprisingly, was the first host nation to not win the opening game, because even 2002 World Cup, Korea actually beat Poland, which actually shocked the world. Also shocking the world again after finishing fourth place. But I spoke to a number of my sports writer buddies who were over in Qatar, and they were very disappointed at the fact that the Qatari fans left before the match was done and over with, because there were, there's not enough fan support is what they're saying for Qatar. I mean, it's different here in South Korea, right? Very quickly before go ahead.
I just want to say, but there was, of course, a lot of fan support in terms of the opening performance by Jungkook.
Is that why you're wearing purple today?
Oh, wow.
Are you an ARMY, a diehard fan?
No, but I was really proud at watching that performance.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
especially, the lyrics. I just want to sing one line of the song. It goes, "Look who we are the dreamers." But the "look who we are," it sounds like "look Korea." It kind of sounds like Korea when I listen to it. Yeah. I don't know. I had that proud feeling, that moment.
Feeling a bit too proud, maybe.
That pride just taking over Soa there. There was a question from Benny. This is something that I've been calling all of our reporters. I called every one of them every 4-year fan. Are you guys an every 4-year fan? As in, like, you guys
Of
only
World Cup?
As in, you become a soccer fan every 4 years.
Soccer fan.
Only every 4 years.
I agree. I have to admit. Yes, I have to admit
okay.
that.
Sometimes we just have. Although you said 2-0, which was very, football fan-ish.
Thank
instead
you.
of saying 2-0. But nevertheless, guys, thank you very much for your reports today. Stay safe, and we'll see you guys again.
See you.
Thank you.
You can listen to Korea Now with me, SJ Lee, by downloading the Arirang radio application, or tune in online by visiting www.arirangradio.com. So make sure you tune in Mondays through Fridays, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Korea time.